So just over a week since the government's fall federal economic update was released, I want to go into more detail about every single program and benefit here that was announced. We're going to go over 5 new ones that were included inside of this budget that some people might be eligible for, as well as the 4 benefits that the government really wants you to know about that have already been ongoing. And at the end of the video, we're going to talk about the relatively shocking amount of money that the government of Canada has left over that they're just deciding not to use right now. So let's get right into it. And by the way, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so you can remain up to date on this and other important things for Canadians. Inside of this budget, on the 33rd page of 96 in this large document, we've got this paragraph here describing the new support that Canadians are going to be getting, especially Canadians who need it most in the government's eyes. They point out 2 different bills that they brought at the beginning of this session of Parliament. Parliament sort of took a break over the summer and started back up halfway through September, and as soon as that started, the Liberals put forward these 2 new bills, sort of part of a package deal here called the Cost of Living Relief Act. We've got Bill number 1, that's Bill C-30, as well as Bill number 2, that's Bill C-31. Bill number 1 has already gone through and become legal, and we'll get into the impact of that in just a second. And Bill number 2 is just in the final steps of the Canadian Senate before it becomes a reality. Very likely that this is going to pass. It's very rare that the Canadian Senate actually acts as a bill when the federal government has already passed it fully. But now let's get into what the government is calling the new benefits for this session of Parliament. I'm going to move myself up here so you can see a little bit more clearly. And the first one that we have here is the doubling of the GST credit for 6 months. This is something that may have already hit your account or you could be expecting to receive soon. In this economic update, it says in the coming weeks, an estimated 11 million low and modest income people and families will receive an additional goods and service tax credit payment. For those who need it most, inflation relief will soon be on the way to help with the cost of groceries and other essentials. So this benefit is something that has actually been happening for quite a while. The government charges a GST or HST, depending on where you are, on the goods and services that you purchase, right? For the GST, though, if you are below a certain income, you'll receive some of this money back because the government's essentially saying for low-income workers and people around a certain income level, we want to give this money back. And this has been happening for quite a long time, but the doubling of the GST credit for 6 months is something new that was inside of that first Bill C-30, that cost of living relief, right? So we're expecting to see that hit people's bank accounts, well, last week or throughout this week or in the coming days if you have yet to receive this. If you aren't familiar with this bill, I go into way more detail about how you can directly determine how much you're going to be receiving or have already received in a video, and I'll sort of link this right here. It's probably covering my face right now if you're watching this. An interesting thing to note about this benefit is that it's just a one-time payment. This is the only time it's happening. We thought that we might receive a double payment in January as well, but instead they're sort of taking the amount that 2 double GST payments would be, smashing it all together and giving it to us in one go here. So that is the doubling of the GST credit for 6 months. The next one that the Liberal government wants to point at as their help for Canadians is the Canada Dental benefit. This is a benefit that the Liberal government has said that they were going to bring for quite a long time, but didn't actually ever do until they were heavily pressured by the NDP and Jagmeet Singh. You might be familiar with the fact that the Liberals and Jagmeet Singh and the NDPs have sort of been working together for the past little while, and this is the result, right? The NDP said, hey, we'll back you up, Liberals. We won't make it so that there's an election anytime from now until 2025, I believe, as long as you do these set number of things that we have on a list here. We want you to push these things forward, and this is one of the things that the NDP brought. So they say as a first step towards making dental care more affordable for everyone, in September 2022, the government introduced legislation. This was Bill C-31, not Bill C-30, so the second part of that act we talked about, which would provide eligible parents or guardians with direct, upfront, tax-free payments to cover dental expenses for their children under 12 years old. So they're saying this is just a first step for the Canada Dental benefit, and they're planning on expanding it out to more people. I believe that folks with disabilities are next on the list when they expand this. As well as sort of slowly raising that age and determining who will be next to get this Canada Dental benefit. They continue here saying for those without dental coverage and with an annual family income under $90,000 per year, so that's you and your significant other. If you're a household, your income has to be under $90,000 per year. The Canada Dental benefit will provide payments totaling up to $1,300 per child over the next 2 years. So don't be confused here. This is not $1,300 per child per year. This is $1,300 over the next 2 years. So when this bill passes, very, very likely that it does, people can expect to be receiving $650 per child under 12 who will be eligible for this dental care program. Again, you have to be under $90,000 per year, and you can't have any other kind of dental coverage. If you have a benefit or some sort of program at work that covers your dental, you would be disqualified from eligibility for this. Again, no details as of yet as to how you will apply for this, if you'll need to actually show receipts that this money is going towards dental programs, or whether or not there's going to be any sort of stipulations around this money. Again, subscribe to the channel so you can know when applications open up. And to finish things up here, by 2025, the Liberal government says, hey, we're going to have a national dental care program that should cover everybody who does not have private dental care. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually happens or not, and if this partnership with the NDP and the Liberals continues long term. Now, the next benefit that we need to talk about is the top up to the Canada Housing Benefit, and this is one that was also included inside of Bill C-31. This is a top up to the Canada Housing Benefit. This is a benefit that's been ongoing since 2020. The provinces and the federal government, the countrywide government, will work on this in tandem and fund this in tandem. So the problem with that also, though, is it's not a big national framework for who receives this. This is on a province by province or territory by territory basis, right? All of the application details are going to be slightly different based on the province that you're in. And in fact, applications might either be open or not open for this program depending on your province. So you'll have to look up Canada Housing Benefit for your province to get more details on whether or not you're eligible, but let's get into the details of exactly what this is. This is a $500 one-time payment for 1.8 million low-income renters who are struggling with the cost of housing. The eligibility for this is in line with what the Canada Housing Benefit is as of right now, which we'll get into here. They say this payment more than doubles the government's 2022 commitment to this Canada Housing Benefit program and will reach twice as many Canadians as initially promised. The federal benefit will be available to applicants with an adjusted net income below $35,000 for families or below $20,000 for single Canadians. So these are folks who are definitely struggling on this level of income, especially amid the rising cost of living crisis we have here in Canada. So one income stipulation here is that you have to be spending 30% or more of your income towards rent. And again, if you're a family together, you can't be earning under or over $35,000. And as an individual, you can't be earning over $20,000 to even be eligible for this $500 top-up. I mean, it's something, but it's something that not a lot of Canadians are going to be eligible for. And will that $500 really make a difference when you see rents $1,500, $1,600, over $2,000 in certain areas? That remains to be seen, but we'll continue here. It's not my job to critique them. I'm just bringing you the information in this video. Of course, I critique them on other videos. Now, continuing here is an automatic advance for the Canada's Worker Benefit. And this is something that is actually new, something that was never talked about prior to this economic update. And this is the splitting up of the Canada's Worker Benefit into 4 direct payments that go to Canadians instead of one lump sum payment that comes at tax time after you file your taxes and after you claim the Canada Workers Benefit tax credit. It was previously a tax credit, now it's not, and I'm going to explain the difference and why that could be significant. So the Canada Workers Benefit has existed for a while now, and it's always been a refundable tax credit. Now, tax credits are either refundable or non-refundable. When a tax credit is non-refundable, that means that you can use it to lower your income when you're on your taxes so that you don't have to pay as much, right? You can lower your income, but if it's non-refundable, you can't lower your income below zero so that you would actually get money back. That is what a refundable tax credit is, and that is what the Canada's Worker Benefit is. If your income is low enough, you can use this tax credit to either lower your income so you don't pay as much tax or to get extra money back, bringing you below zero income. But there's going to be a big change to this Canada Workers Benefit because instead of delivering it through tax returns and tax credits, instead the government's going to use your last year's taxes to determine your income level, determine if you're eligible for the Canada's Worker Benefit, and instead hand this out in quarterly direct cash payments to Canadians instead of having to wait until tax time, because they're recognizing, hey, people who need this money kind of need the money now. But even though they're recognizing that this money is important for people who are at this income level right now and they need it now, payments aren't going to start happening until July 2023 for the 2023 taxation year. So you'll only expect sort of 2 advanced payments in 2023. That's coming in July and likely coming in September, or July, August, September, October for the second one. October, November, December. That's the last quarter of the year. Again, this is a quarterly payment, essentially every 3 months. Now, the next program here is eliminating interest on federal student and apprentice loans. As you might already know, man, I can't talk today. The federal government will give money to Canadians as a loan, and they don't have to start paying that back until after they graduate from either their university or college program or their apprenticeship program. Now, typically after a certain amount of time after you've graduated, you have to start paying this back, and you have to start paying it back with interest, which can make it more difficult to pay this off. And that is what the federal government is trying to eliminate here. This is actually something that they did throughout the pandemic, but this is the first word that we've gotten that this is going to be extended long term. They say the 2022 Fall Economic Statement proposes to make all Canada student loans and student apprentice loans permanently interest-free, including those currently being repaid beginning on April 1st. This change has an estimated cost of $2.7 billion over 5 years and about $500 million every single year after that. Now, this is a lot different from what the US is doing with Joe Biden trying to pass this student loan forgiveness of $10,000, sort of just reducing the debt by 10 grand. Instead, the federal government says, hey, on the portion of your loan that is federal, we won't charge interest, but hey, we're going to still need that money back. And an important thing to note here is that most people, when they get these kind of loans, most of it is through the province, through their provincial sort of bursaries and grants and loans program. I know that in Ontario, it's OSAP, Ontario Secondary Assistance Program, I believe it stands for. Notably, that is still going to charge you interest, and it's the far larger portion, so a little bit underwhelming here for students, especially given what's happening south of the border. And we're going to get into the ongoing programs here, but the federal government sort of tries to lump in this making housing more affordable section to try to make it maybe a little bit less underwhelming for folks who are expecting more from this economic update. They say they're doing a number of things to make housing more affordable, a 2-year ban on non-Canadians purchasing residential property in Canada, as well as a 1% tax on underused housing. This has been in place for quite a while, so people can still purchase these homes, but if it's not tenanted, if not renting it out, then they're going to be charged 1% annual on the cost of the home, maybe the assessed value of the home. We also have here the application of the GST and HST to all assignment sales. This is essentially trying to target people who flip condos before they're even built, right? You can buy a contract to purchase a condo as it's being built, and oftentimes the value of that contract will go up in value because you're locked in at a certain price, and now houses are more valuable. So people will flip these contracts much like you'd flip a pair of sneakers or even like a traditional house, except this one's just the contract to purchase it. You can sort of arbitrage that, make a little bit of money. They don't want to see that anymore, so they cut this off. Continuing on, we've got the tax-free first home savings account. I've made a video about that here on the channel, so I won't go into too much depth here, but this is a way that you can sort of invest money to try to earn up to a down payment that'll allow you to not have to pay tax on the gains of your investments. Again, I'll put a link right here, and if it's not right here, someone get in the comments and say, hey, Russell, you forgot the link, and give me the timestamp, and I'll go in there and put it so that you can find that video. Otherwise, you can search up Russell Matthews first-time home buyers tax credit, and you'll find the full video there. Or rather, I mean the tax-free first home savings account, not the first-time home buyers tax credit, but you can also get more information on that. Tax credit for certain first-time home buyers that'll reduce the cost by $1,500 in direct support. Again, not a huge jump up here. And then we have the multi-generational home renovation tax, making it less expensive because you can apply, again, a tax credit if you are renovating your home to make it so that your elderly parents can live with you, or so that your home can be more multi-generational. Again, the Canadian government's like, hey, maybe we can solve this housing problem by just shoving more people into the same family household. And then more strict rules on flipping houses and making sure that tax is paid on that if you are flipping it in under 12 months, even if it's your primary residence, I think is likely here. So that's one big change. And I think the federal government was like, hey, there's really not a lot here in this economic update for people who are struggling with the rising cost of living, because they're like, why don't we make a section here of a bunch of things that we've already done to try to make this sound better? The first one is enhancing the Canada's worker benefit. Again, these are are the additional benefits that are ongoing here that they wanted to highlight. And this is something we touched on already, but they increased it by about $1,200 if you're someone who's the lowest income and you're single, I believe. Yeah, that's a $1,200 increase there. You would have already received some of this if you filed your taxes and got that tax credit, as well as cutting childcare fees. They'll point to this saying, hey, we're getting down to $10 a day healthcare. Liberals will always talk about this, but first they're getting it down to 50% of the previous cost of childcare as a stepping stone to get to that $10 a day childcare. So they wanted to point that out, as well as them pointing out something that was actually really controversial at the time, increasing the old age security pension by 10% for the most vulnerable seniors, people 75 years and older. This is the controversial part, right? 75 years and older, which began in July 2022, giving $800 in new support to full pensioners over the first year. It was so controversial because seniors are 65 plus. That has always been the definition of seniors, but now they're sort of segregating this into two different groups, saying 75 plus will give you this extra money, but 65 plus we will not, right? Two different distinct groups of seniors here. This is the first time it's been done. Super controversial. A lot of people saying, hey, well, there's probably going to be less 75-year-olds and older than if we had just given it to everybody. So maybe the government's trying to save a little bit of money here. But moving on, the last thing that they wanted to highlight here that I'm going to cover is the important benefits being indexed to inflation. The Canada Child Benefit and the Canada Pension Plan, OAS, and the GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, those are all indexed to inflation. So if you're receiving any of those benefits, well, certainly this year you're going to get a relatively large bump up. I believe that Canadian inflation sits at 6.9% this year. So depending on when they actually calculate this, you probably will see anywhere from a 5 to 8% increase in your benefits year over year, just because that's what the inflation, the CPI numbers came in at. So those are all the new and some ongoing benefits that were announced in this fall economic update just last week. And you might be surprised to see that there's really not a ton in there to help people who are struggling with the rising cost of living, especially if you're not at the absolute lowest income level and you're somewhere in the lower middle class. This is something that will be a little bit shocking, surprising to you. This comes from a pivot of the Liberals' finance goals right now. Before they said, okay, we're going to make sure that we're covering everyone, taking care of everyone, spending a ton of money to give out all of these benefits. And now the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says, hey, Canada, be careful. You can't spend too much because otherwise that's going to fight against what the Bank of Canada is doing right now, raising interest rates to try to fight against inflation. So instead, Canada's chosen to take a more fiscally prudent, and these are the Liberal government's words, path here with this economic statement. And this comes even after the federal government made about $40 billion more in revenue this year than they had expected. They were projecting a deficit of $52.8 billion this year, but they only really got $36.4 billion this year. And this is largely due to the rising cost of living. We have inflation, which means goods cost more and things are taxed more because of those higher prices. So they make a little bit of money there, as well as the exploding energy prices, right? The oil prices and gas prices went up dramatically. One of Canada's largest exports and one of the largest industries. Again, one of the largest things that the Canadian government can tax. So they ended up with $40 billion more than they expected, reducing their deficit or reducing the debt that they've gone into this year by $20 billion. But despite having this economic windfall, the federal government chose to sort of hold on to this fiscal firepower. This is what they're calling it, keeping our powder dry is the quote, instead of sending it out to Canadians more directly. Obviously will be a little bit controversial in some people's eyes, but I'm curious what you think about all of this. Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. And again, if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel because about half of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed. And when you click that button for free, it helps the channel out dramatically and make sure that you're going to get the latest information when it becomes available. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.